Today, a walk round the studio. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, welcome to this post covering finance and problem news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today I am going to do something which I've been promising to do some time, which is to give you a bit of a guided tour of our current studio setup. Now, over the last 3 or 4 years we've been building out the studio, and in fact I did a video some months ago introducing our new video switcher. I'll put a link to that above. But today I'm going to wander around and give you a little bit of a sense of precisely the way that the studio is currently configured. And in the process, we'll explain our signal chains, both for audio and for visual, and also go into some detail with regard to the different configurations that we use for different types of video. So I'm recording this on my Osmo Pocket, and therefore the audio will be a little bit different from normal, but hopefully it's reasonably good to listen to. What I'm going to do now is to introduce you to the first part of our studio, which is essentially the part that we use for our interviews. As you know, we sometimes interview John Adams and other people too, and we do have the facility to be able to have multiple people in the studio at the same time. So here you have the pretty standard setup, which is effectively a green screen. In front of the green screen, we have a seat, we have a Rode microphone, and we have appropriate lighting so that we can light the green screen independently of whoever is sitting in the seat. And that configuration is then repeated so that we have another seat, another Rode microphone, and another green screen. And we have a series of studio lights that are strategically placed to enable us to be able to light both scenes at the same time. Now, we record both of those using our blackmagic cameras. These are cinema cameras we've had for quite a long time, and they're actually excellent because we can control them remotely. Now, one of the little tricks that we learnt was it's really useful to have a monitor locally, and therefore we can see what's going on, as well as feeding the signal from the camera to our switching system. And then we have another camera over here pointing the other way, and this camera also has an auto cue set up in front of it if we chose to use it. And once again, you can see that we have the same setup with a video camera so that the talent can see what's going on when they sit down. Now, each microphone feeds into the mixer that we've got here. Each comes in on a separate channel and is then mixed and balanced and then fed through to the switcher, which I'll show you shortly. And that allows us to set the audio up for each person we're recording, and also, of course, make sure that we have the levels right. No, not too much clipping, but also making sure that we have reasonable levels such that the sound is reasonable. And then the final part is we also have the ability to monitor the screen, and in fact I can switch between the two channels so that we can see what's going on. Okay, so having looked at the studio setup for our interviews, let me now guide you through the rest of the setup, which includes the production center and also the way that I have the studio configured when I make my own shows direct to camera. So here you can see the cockpit, which includes the mixer, our various monitors, and our main switch. And also you can see my green screen, which is the third green screen that I've built, which I use for my own background. I should say, by the way, that all of the green screens are purely constructed from a very simple aluminium frame that I built myself, and just with a piece of green over the top. Now, if I come into my operating position, firstly you can see that we have a camera there with an auto cue on the front of it, and that allows me to speak directly into the camera and also read from the script. That camera is a Sony, and the reason I've used that is for its autofocus capability, because Unlike the blackmagic cameras, which are manually focused, the Sony allows it to home in on my face wherever I am, even if I move about a bit. So I found that that works the best way. We also have no less than 4 lights in the setup here, each of which can be controlled separately, but also can be controlled together. And each of those lights has been adjusted to give a relatively even dispersion of illumination. And the green screen also has its own light, and it's important to illuminate that separately to avoid green spill. Now, when I come to take a seat, the first thing you'll notice is that I have a monitor directly in my line of sight, and that allows me to keep a view of what's going on. You can also see, by the way, that the green screen is operating. And if I fade that out, and that's the green screen with just a background, and I can then bring myself into view, and that is the final presentation. And that's the way it looks when I record. Now let me show you the vision switcher that I use. This is actually a blackmagic switcher, and it allows me to control all of the various inputs coming in, and then allows me to make the various adjustments that I want to make, and then send the signal on. Not only can I control that through the buttons, and by the way, here I can control the focus and the iris for each of the blackmagic cameras, which allows me to remotely control the ones in the studio. But also have the facility, using the ATEM control software, to be able to control the whole thing electronically. And this is one of the great powerful tools of the blackmagic approach. So for example, if I want to make a switch, I can simply slide the slider up and it works. And of course I've disappeared now because I'm using a green screen background. I can also change the background. So for example, at the moment I've got the standard blue background that I use with DFA, but for example I could pick a sunset and have that as an alternative. I use that sometimes when I live cross on the ABC News 24. Or I can use my beach background, and again that works quite well during the day, and sometimes I use that for live television. Or I could even go through my own room. So this is actually a photograph of my main room upstairs, and again it just shows the power of the green screen. Or if you wanted to, you could even make it into a studio environment. I have tried that, but frankly I don't particularly like that look. Tell me what you think. Which of the backgrounds do you prefer? I'm going to go back to my blue background. So that's the one I tend to use for my DFA shows. Now, the power of the ATEM control software isn't limited to the screen controls. It also allows me to run everything via macros. And I've spent quite a bit of time in recent months building a whole series of control buttons, which allows me then to run different processes directly by just pressing a single button. And in fact, this is really a very important capability, because without it I couldn't run the live shows. So for example, if I want to do a Martin ident, as I've called it, it runs, macro runs, comes up, and then goes away again. Or if I want to run the DFA intro, I can do that. And the way that works is it runs, it takes control of the system until it's finished, and then comes back to the live. And I can also then switch directly, if I want to the PC. This is where I run all of my presentations, and that means I can put them directly on the program. So that is a really important part of the facility I have here. Now, the other thing then to talk about is the audio side of things. What I've got here is a Rode broadcaster microphone, which actually works very, very well for what I want. And I position it just below the sight level from the camera so that effectively you can't see it in shot generally. It has a built-in windshield on the front, which means that it keeps the quality of the audio pretty good. And I run that through a mixing desk. It's a pretty straightforward affair, but that allows me then to adjust the volume. I run a compressor on the audio to make it a little bit more punchy, and I can control the gains directly through the mixer. And the mixer then runs directly into the ATEM switcher, and that audio then shows up on the mixer and essentially allows me to take full control of it. Now, there are audio mixing facilities on the ATEM switcher, but nevertheless I found that the physical mixer made a big difference. Now, the other thing that I've got here is a screen which I can see in more detail what's going on. I use that when I'm focusing the cameras manually. And the other thing you may have noticed just below the screen, I have a series of push buttons there, and those push buttons allow me to route and source the various feeds and switch them to different outputs. So for example, I can configure the cameras to go to various destinations, be it for recording purposes or be it for streaming purposes. And for that purpose, I use the Pearl. I found the Pearl to be a really useful device. It allows me to record simultaneously multiple audio and visual streams and then sync them up afterwards. But it also allows me to stream live to YouTube. So what that means is that I can take all of the signals from the various sources, including from the computer and also from the camera, mix them down and stream live. And that's pretty much it in terms of how the system works. It seems to work reasonably well. I have the occasional problem when I forget to push a button in the right sequence, but as I've built more macros, essentially the control systems are a little bit easier to use. Now, just continuing the tour of our studio, I wanted to show you the behind view of the way we've set everything up. And the thing you'll notice straight away is the spaghetti. We do have quite a few different cables running around behind the scenes. It's part of the configuration to be able to make it all work. And one of the most interesting things, if you follow it, is to look down here, and you can see that we have a bunch of cables running away. And in fact, these cables run all the way to our machine room. The reason for that is that the other part of the setup is our other video switcher. And that video switcher, again by Blackmagic, is way too noisy to have in the studio. So all of the feeds coming in and out go through that bunch of cables. It's about a 15-meter run per cable, and we have about 30 cables running between the studio and the machine room. So what I'm going to do now is go down to the machine room and show you the rest of the system. Oh, and by the way, in case you're wondering, these are our two studio hands, Jasper the Labrador and Winston, who's the three-legged dog. And occasionally you may hear them in the background when I'm recording, because they do occasionally help themselves to a water from their bowl. And when they go at it hard, you can actually hear it on the recording occasionally. I do try to avoid that when I can, but occasionally I can't. So here is the machine room, which is the other end of those cables. And I'm now going to just take you through each of the devices that we have. We have three. Firstly, we have our production switcher. Secondly, we have a recorder and playback device, and that's the one that provides the recorded video streams, for example, for the introduction and outro. And that player is remote controlled. And then the other piece of kit is our video hub. And this is the device that allows us to route signals to and from each of the inputs and outputs. That's all the output side. We have the inputs over there as well. And then we have these running to the back of the production switcher and also the recorder. And it's the combination of all these that actually makes it all work. And you can see the bundle of cables running here down from the studio. Now, this is a rather complex setup that we've now got. But the beauty of it is that because of the fact that we have this video hub, we don't actually have to physically change any of the cables. We simply do all our configuration in software. And as I showed you a little while ago, we have the switches under the monitor in the studio, which allows us to route everything in and out. And while we're here, I will just highlight one other thing, and this is our server. This is the server on which the DFA core market model lives and where we run all our calculations on an ongoing basis. So it's quite a large storage device. We have quite a few hard drives plugged in there, and that gives us sufficient capacity to run all of our models and to maintain our history of all of our files right the way back from 2002 onwards. So I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour of how we go about creating our shows. As you can see, quite a lot of it is simply due to having enough gear to be able to control the various aspects of what we do. But hopefully the gear doesn't get in the way of good production values and in the way of producing good content. Because of course the trick is not just to focus on the technology, but to focus on the content that we're making. So if you've got any further questions with regard to our studio configuration, put them in the comments below. I'll try and answer them. And I look forward to you joining us next time for our next show, whether it's a live stream or whether it's a pre-recorded show. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.